So after all the work I did with Heal, ultimately my personal conclusion was that all healing is ultimately spiritual, and it has to do with this, letting go of a fear of death, letting go of this separation attachment to our physical. It's basically transcending the five sensory humanhood, right? So, talk a little bit about healing, because Anita Morjani, I'm sure you know her story, had that shift in consciousness. She went to the other realm and then came back to Earth School, and she had this awareness. She had that direct experience with love, with universal love. So I guess for anybody that's dealing with a terminal diagnosis or struggling with illness and feeling like a victim, or feeling like it was their fault, or trying to figure out why me, can you talk about, a shift in perception that perhaps will help them navigate it by choosing love?
Oh, yes, yes. Um, and by the way, I agree with everything you said, with one exception that I might suggest use a little slightly different word if you're open.
Yeah.
Instead of letting go, it's a choice. It's a conscious choice, and it requires courage and commitment. For example, when you're in grieving, when a child has died, when you find that you're dying, and the grief, the pain, you go through all the phases that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote about so clearly, and then you finally get to acceptance. It's a little bit like life, finally when it brings you to your knees, that's when most people are open to an alternative path, a spiritual path. But you don't have to wait that long. You can start doing this now. And I know that creating authentic power is the only effective preventative medicine. There is nothing else. By the time any dysfunction occurs in the Earth School, it's already acute. Like we think that a broken bone or a cardiac infarction or a ischemic stroke is an emergency, and we rush to the hospital with sirens wailing and lights flashing. But from the multisensory perspective, by the time any physical dysfunction becomes evident, it's already acute. Now, what can you do about it? This is where creating authentic power comes in. By the way, every soul is going to go home. We're all going to die. Although it's not what it's thought to be. I heard of a channeled entity once was asked, tell me about death. And the entity said, it's entirely safe. So there's a light at both ends of this tunnel in the earth that takes you into the Earth School and takes you out. So given that, what do we do when we find out we have cancer? What do we do when we're in the pain and shock of grief and loss and despair? Well, what most people do is nothing. And if they do something, it's a distraction. Alcohol, drugs, sex, shopping, smoking, masturbating, pornography, gambling, buying. But if you have the courage to develop emotional awareness and feel inside yourself what this grief, despair, loss, rage, judgment feels like, really feels like, what are you nose to nose with here? Then you know what you're challenging. And I don't mean going to war with a part of yourself. Not at all. Always pay attention to your emotions. Never try to push them away. There are messages with value, with precious information from your soul. They're saying, Kelly, Gary, fear is active in you, or love is active in you, so that you can make a responsible choice and challenge the fear or cultivate the love. And challenge the fear doesn't mean do combat with it. It means recognize it and say in whatever way that's meaningful to you, I'm not going to be controlled by this time. Not this time. It's as though you're on the beach and you draw a line in the sand with your big toe and you say, I'm not crossing this line this time. You're over there and I'm over here, and I'm not acting in your energy. Period. That's where the courage and that's where the commitment comes in. And the courage to experience the pain of the frightened part of your personality that is demanding that you lash out, that you do what needs to be done to correct this, that you change the world so that it will feel better about itself and valuable. But those are the times in which multisensory humans, after a while, say something that five-sensory humans couldn't understand. They say, thank you. Thank you to the universe. Because that experience is the universe showing you a part of your personality that prevents you from loving. And the direction that you're moving in is toward love. That's the short of it. But the point is, you create with your choices of intention, love or fear, and you experience what you create. And as you see that what you're creating in fear keeps you from the meaning and the joy and the purpose and the vitality and the energy and the compassion and the love that is calling to you, then you begin to develop a yearning for that, a yearning to create authentic power, to use the experiences of your life instead of complain about them or try to change them.
Yes.
Look at it. That's the invitation. Look at it. Don't curse it. Don't blame it. Don't judge it. Don't drink some bourbon to mask it. Take a look at what you're doing. Take a look at your life. Because until you do, it's not going to change. So if you like where you are now, don't change. But do you really? When I was living in San Francisco, when I was in my early 20s, I was my whole life was filled with anger, judgment, and I thought I was pretty cool. I thought I was the dude. I had my life was filled with motorcycles and women. I was addicted to sex, and I was angry, and the two were closely related because they both come from fear, and the need for sex was relentless because the pain of fear that I wasn't allowing myself to experience was relentless. And when I say addicted to sex, it's not the kind of thing of forcing yourself on someone else. The women that I was drawn to were drawn to me. They wanted the same thing. In fact, that was a pivotal moment in my healing my addiction to addiction, because I knew that I thought I was manly and admirable, and I had so many notches on my pistol grip. And I knew that none of the women I was with meant anything to me. They were just there for me to use. But then the time came when I realized that I didn't mean anything more to them than they meant to me. And that's when I saw the ugliness of a sexual addiction. Until then, I thought it was manly. I thought it was admirable. I thought it was just an expression of love. I'm uncontrollably loving. It's not. It's a mutually predatory activity that draws. I was never drawn to women who were strong and clear and knew about their lives, or at least felt their feelings, not their needfulness, but had a sense of themselves. They had zero sexual attraction for me, and they will for any sexual addict. It's only the women in the room that I could seduce, that lit up like a sonar in me. I would go boing, 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 boing. And when it did that, I had found a woman who didn't think that well of herself, who didn't have inner strength and clarity, who wasn't yet capable of moving beyond the fears that were controlling her, just as my fears were controlling me. So what I'm saying is that it's possible to be in fear and think that you're really doing pretty well in life. Whatever it is, that you are doing to change the world or impress other people with your beauty, with your wealth, with your fame, with your sexuality, with your car, with your motorcycle, that's the pursuit of external power. And it is an expression of fear, and it is an attempt to mask the pain of powerlessness.
Yes.
Challenging that, moving beyond it, is for me the healing journey. I hadn't put it in those terms because the soul doesn't need healing, but it's moving into health. It's moving into sanity. It's moving into your own vitality and joy of life.
Perhaps waking up to this and starting to practice awareness and emotional awareness will be an important step on healing, because we've been so cut off. We've been so in the cycle of coming from fear in the five sensory world that just becoming aware and awake to the choice of coming from love and being aware of the part that's operating and reacting in fear, that will create a new energy, authentic power building within you that can then be the catalyst for healing.
That's exactly right. That's exactly how, but what I say is that's right in terms of my experience. It's yes, and there's a difference between healing and curing. Curing is changing physical symptoms. Symptomology disappears, or it goes away, or it gets better. A healing is a shift in consciousness, away from fear and into love.
So I love when you talk about Gandhi, you know, how the viceroy takes him out of prison and he's able to, you know, clearly communicate, my fight is not with you, viceroy. My fight is against the policies, the social constructs, this oppression, whatever it may be. So I think that's so important, because that allows us another perception of, okay, if someone's attacking me and I feel the anger coming up and I feel the sensations in my body and I become emotionally aware, and then I say, okay, I'm going to choose love here, it has to come from a compassion and understanding that we all have this innate powerlessness that just comes in this earth suit experience. And if someone's attacking you, they're operating from their fear personality aspect, from their powerless feeling of powerlessness. Is that correct?
That is correct.
There has to be, you know, so it's cultivating emotional awareness, realizing that it's not, the problems aren't outside of you. The circumstances of your life are revealing what's in you that needs to be held or healed, or become aware of, brought to the light. And then we can have compassion for ourselves, those parts of ourselves that are scared. And in that way, we can choose to respond with love, which it means inherently that you're having compassion for the other, knowing that it has nothing to do with you, what is occurring or what they're doing to you. Is that correct? Or what disease you have.
That's how I see it. That's how I see it. I would say also that it's more than having compassion for the other person. When you have compassion for yourself, you have compassion for others. Compassion is good medicine that you give to yourself and you give to others at the same time. If you're not compassionate for yourself, you really won't be compassionate with others. You might be empathetic or sympathetic, but to be compassionate requires being compassionate with yourself. And that's a wonderful experience. I really enjoy discovering that what I have seen in my experience is apparently calibratable in meaningful ways to the discoveries that you've made about healing.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I really enjoyed your podcast. I have in preparation, I heard some of the podcasts that you did with Peter Crone.
Oh yeah.
and in his way, I think you and Peter were talking about, if not similar, then the same things.
Mm-hmm.
Same things in terms of what is health. Well, it involves awareness. Well, it involves self-responsibility. Well, it involves intention. Are you going to remain a victim all your life? Or even for the next few seconds. And even though a frightened part of your personality would stay a victim all your life, and probably has happened to other personalities of your soul, in fact has, are you going to start to challenge it now, right now? And all of that is involved in health. And all of it is involved in health in a way that's much more fundamental than your first trip to a physician to see the results of your last blood test or how the last chemo did or anything else. Oh, I'd like to ask you, in my experience, there's only one cause of disease, of physical deterioration and decay, and that's negativity.
Thank you for listening to the Heal Podcast. Be sure to tune in for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. Oh, and make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. And if you feel inspired, we would love you to rate and review us so that we have the opportunity to reach more people. And of course, you can follow us on Instagram for some behind-the-scenes fun and more inspiration at @HealDocumentary and @Kelly Gores. Thank you so much and be well.